Hello and welcome to another Melbourne AWS user group. It is now halfway through 2021 and we're still doing these virtually, but that's okay because we have some great content and we're good to go for another great night of informative AWS chat. So this is episode 105, I think, that we're up to now. And I know most people are probably asking, when are we going to get back to in-person events? You can ask the state government for that one. For now, we're just in a holding pattern to wait to see what happens with relaxing restrictions, that sort of thing. But it is probably safe to say that as long as the indoor masks are mandatory, we probably won't be going back for events, because I certainly won't be turning up to host it if I have to wear a mask. We'll see how we go. I know some groups have gone back to events previously and then stopped again. We'll wait and see what the restrictions are, what the appetite is, and when people are back in the city, I suppose, and when we can get a venue. So many variables. We'll see how we go. But for now, let's get on with our regularly scheduled evening. So the agenda for tonight, this is the introductions bit that I'm walking through now. We then have a news segment with Ian and Guy Morton, called Ian and Friends, or What's New in AWS. They'll run through what's changed in the last 12 months, or last month. Oof, last 12 months will be here for a few days. What's changed in the last month. Then we have our first presentation will be from Guy is up again. He will be talking about the CDK to build a cross-account pipeline factory. This should be quite fascinating, and hopefully a good amount of detail. And then after that will be Brenna, who is taking us through the macOS EC2 instances and integrated as a Jenkins node. It should be really cool for iOS builds. This is something that's actually very close to my heart because I straddle the iOS and the AWS world. Even though I haven't had a chance to play with the macOS instances yet, so I'm really keen to see how this goes. We encourage you to ask questions. Obviously, this is a virtual event, but we are all in the same virtual space. Please feel free to ask questions either in #Melbourne. I can never get this correct. Been doing this for 15 months, so I still can't get it right. In #Melbourne on Slack, using the hashtag AWS Melbourne on Twitter, or right there in the chat on YouTube. At the end of every presentation, either myself or my co-host Ian, who you'll meet in a moment, we'll jump on the broadcast with our presenter and we'll ask those questions on your behalf. So make sure as soon as you have a question, you post it either in the chat there or in the chat anywhere, and we'll ask it for you. Do please ask questions. Like it's great to see the interactivity and people actually engaging with what's coming out. We also welcome any comments, questions, feedback, general chat in those same channels. Slack, Twitter, did it again. Slack, Twitter, YouTube, anywhere you like. Now, we couldn't be putting these events on virtual though we are without the support of our sponsors. And our sponsors have been with us since before the pandemic started. Actually, these sponsors were with us last year in 2020, and have graciously stuck around despite the fact that we don't meet in person anymore, and they've continued to provide support for the community throughout this time. So big thanks to our gold sponsor Enabler, and our 3 silver sponsors AC3, CMD, and Do It International. Big thanks to everybody for helping out with those. Quick look at who are we. My name is Rob. I'm at Bok on most social media platforms, or at Bok_, depending on which one. And my co-host, who you'll meet in a moment, is Ian. We don't work for AWS. We are just members of the community, same as you. We work in and around AWS on a day-to-day basis. Like that's why we're so heavily involved in the platform. But yeah, we don't work for AWS themselves. The benefit of that is for everybody here is that we all have our own opinions, and we're all happy to hear all opinions about AWS, good, bad, or ugly. We don't have to toe any sort of AWS marketing line or only tell the good things or anything like that. We can pretty much tell things as they are. So the best place to keep in touch with the community, the Melbourne AWS user group community, is on Slack. We have one of the most active Slack teams in the Australian user group community. We're up to about 400 members, I think, at the moment. Oh no, that's just one channel. I think we're up to about 700 members at the moment, who have various levels of activity throughout the week. But it's a great place if you have any questions that you want to get asked, or if you're struggling to understand something, or to continue the conversation from tonight. Join us on Slack. The URL is just there. Some of the other channels that we have on there, like the jobs channel, the volunteers channel, and then there's 2 bot channels, one for outages, which has been fairly active today, I see. There's also one for announcements too, where you can discuss the latest changes in AWS. But that's not the only way to get involved. We're always looking for speakers, like always looking for speakers. If you've got something that you're interested in presenting about, no matter how big or how small, get in touch. If you're not sure, just ask us on Slack, or reach out to myself or Ian on Twitter. We're more than happy to help validate ideas, or to look at a presentation for you if you've got an idea and that you want. We're also happy to give great feedback on that as well. Not looking for sponsors just this month. We may be looking for that later in this year. We'll see how we go. And we're always looking for volunteers to join in the volunteers channel on Slack. All right, so there's not normally at this point I have a what else is on that you might be interested in, but unfortunately there is no actual other meetups posted as of today for the next month. So I'm not sure what the rest of the community is doing. Sometimes they do post their events a bit closer to time, so we can't really advertise them here. But definitely check out Meetup. Just search for AWS see if there's other places you might want to be involved in. So with all that said, that's my bit done for the night. We'll hand over to Ian and Guy. Ian, if you could share your screen for me. And we'll flick over to what's new in AWS.
Okay, thanks, Rob, and hello, everybody. As you can see, and as Rob already mentioned, right below me, you can see Guy. So, hello,
hi,
Guy.
Everyone. How are you going?
So let's just have a quick look on what's new in AWS this last month. Unlike last month, we do have some stuff finally in Sydney. That is Aqua, which is a query accelerator for Redshift, and EMR Studio, which allows you to have a IDE type environment for EMR. These fall a little bit outside of my usual things that I work with, so I can't say too much about it.
Yeah. They're both pretty specialized, I guess. If you're a Redshift user, it's perhaps this is something you're familiar with, but basically gives you about 10 times faster queries using a hardware accelerated cache for Redshift. That's what Aqua gives you. So if you're in the market for fast queries on a data warehouse, then that's worth looking at.
So let's just switch over to serverless. And there's one here that I think you're kind of excited about.
Yes. So Workflow Studio is a new visual design tool, like a flow-based programming tool, I guess, for step functions. So if you're familiar with step functions, you're aware that you can view your flow as a little diagram. So this lets you actually build it up from all the individual integration components that are available. It's a nice tool for sort of surfacing a lot of the capability of step functions. I think it's going to be quite useful, especially to people who are new to step functions, who don't want to necessarily, for whom the step of getting into defining the the state machine, using the state machine language might be a bit overwhelming. So yeah, it's definitely a good tool.
Yeah, because the state machine itself, I think you can now write it in YAML, but before that was pure JSON, and that was not the most fun to work with.
That was horrible. Yeah.
That's one way to describe it.
Yeah.
On the API gateways.
Still on step functions. So step functions has a thing called asynchronous express workflow. Basically, what that means is that it will return, like you can trigger the step function and it will return a result. Usually step functions are started, and then you've got a poll for the answer. So a synchronous one will give you a result synchronously. It used to be the case even only a month ago, obviously, because this is new, that you had to go to HTTP APIs to execute a synchronous express workflow, and now API Gateway REST APIs provide you with that, which is nice because API Gateway REST APIs have some features that the HTTP APIs don't have yet. Stuff like being able to sort of munge your inputs and outputs using templates. So HTTP APIs don't have that. So it would have been very nice when I had to do this a month ago and this wasn't available. It would have been good. So you can do that now. Yeah,
it's good to see. It's sometimes a bit strange that one of the API versions gets a feature while the other doesn't. So it's always good to see when they get together a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, shall we just move on to container side of things?
Yep. Take the floor.
Yep. So, two things here that are sort of interesting. For those of you who have seen me before here, you're aware that I quite like Fargate as a service. So even though running it on EKS is not my preferred way to do things, I'm still really happy to see that it now supports custom security groups, which basically means that you can assign your own security groups to the pods you have marked to be used for Fargate. So this obviously allows much better control with security groups. So that's a good one. And the other interesting one is ECS Anywhere, which is still, I'm not entirely sure who is looking for this product, but it allows you to run ECS on your on-prem or probably in other cloud environments while still getting managed from within the AWS console. So if you're really into ECS and don't have a container solution yet for your on-prem, this may just be what you're looking for. But you're most likely already running Kubernetes in some form for that. But still, it's good to see, and I'm curious to see how that will go in the future. No. Then rest is not super exciting. So let's have a look on the DevOps side.
Yep. So Proton's GA. I think we spoke about Proton last month too. I think there was some announcements around Proton. So this is the managed delivery service for container and serverless apps. It's not in Sydney, available in Sydney, but it's now GA in US East 1, US East 2, US West, US East 1, US East 1, US West 1, Europe, and Asia Pacific, Tokyo. Sorry, I should have just stuck to one or the other there. But anyway, it's not in Sydney, is the bottom line. But if you're looking for a large-scale orchestration solution, maybe it's worth having a look at for containers and serverless.
Yep. And one that's quite interesting to me as well is the CloudFormation public registry.
Mm-hmm.
So previously, CloudFormation allowed you to build your own resource types. So you can create what you want to spin up your own instances. This is a bit of work, but can be quite useful. And now it's possible to upload this to a public registry. So in this way, it can be used by third parties that you are likely to use. And they can just provide a CloudFormation template, a CloudFormation resource for you. So you can spin up your CloudFormation to create your New Relic configuration or things like that. Of course, some people like Ian take advantage of that and allow you instead to create to buy stocks using that. But yeah, that is fun, and even he recommends don't do that.
Code Guru has gotten some love again this month. They're quite keen on pushing this, I think. It's now got CI/CD integration with GitHub Actions. So if you're familiar with GitHub and seen the plethora of code quality tooling that's available through that now, I guess AWS wanted to get their Code Guru in the door there as well. So that's available.
Yep. But on the security side, there's top one here that I haven't had a chance to use it yet, but this is likely going to be very useful in a year and a half when we've got the Melbourne region. Basically, you can now use the same KMS keys across regions, which is pretty awesome. Yeah.
Do you know if you pay for each region that they're in? Because obviously these keys aren't expensive. I think they're $1 a month or thereabouts.
Yeah.
But one of the nice things about it would be if you can just have one key and then share it in a bunch of regions potentially, depending on your use case, of course. But if it saves you money, that might be a good thing too.
Yep. That part, I don't know, but
no.
For cross multi-region workloads or even just sharing images and other things between regions, it is very nice that you can now easily do that.
Yeah, and it's a bit like having the same ability to do multi-region secrets now with Secret Manager, which was relatively new as well, which works very nicely.
Yep. And another one that can be useful for people is if you use and it's a lovely acronym, but it's the AWS Certificate Manager Private Certificate Authority, which is their, I think, $400 a month service to create your own certificates, your own private certificates. You can now easily share those with RAM across accounts. And they enabled a lot of extra controls as well to make that all secure, in certain users or roles can access it, but they can't make changes to it and things like that.
Cool.
So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
On the other cool stuff side, we now have the Amazon location service.
Yep. So that's basically out of preview now. And they've added a couple of features. Routing and satellite imagery has been added as well. So I don't think they're going to necessarily kill off Google Maps anytime soon, but it's certainly a handy service to have in the Amazon toolbox if you need to do location-based things, so geofencing and all that sort of guff. So now it's got routing and satellite imagery as well.
Yep. Athena now has a V2 available. I believe that is across all regions, so including Sydney. Basically, this allows certain things are faster or more efficient, and it works slightly different than V1, but I believe it's not a big change, although I haven't compared them closely yet. So there might be some savings in there, or just performance improvements if you are interested in that.
Cool.
The other thing here, while Beijing is not really a region that most of us care about, this was the last region that did not have free availability zones. So basically from, this month, you can always assume that a region has at least 3 availability zones available.
Nice.
Except, it has technically 3 availability zones, but I believe the California region only allows you access to 2. So thinking about that, maybe it's not entirely true.
Mm-hmm. And what do you make of the bug bust competition? Is this just a way of trying to sell more Code Guru?
In a way, but it comes actually with 3 months free of Code Guru. So everybody who wants to check
it a test drive.
Yeah.
Yep. That's
and that is 3 months on top of the existing free tier. So if you sign up for the bug bust competition, it is aimed at fixing your own bugs. And AWS has up to $1 million, I believe, worth of awards for that. So
the idea is the idea is you sort of gamify it within your own organization. So you run a competition in your own organization. Is that how it works?
I think so. I haven't looked at it too closely because it's not something that is really relevant for me.
Because you don't have bugs. No bugs.
Exactly.
Now we know you're lying.
Yep.
Cool.
And that's all we have time for today. But Guy, John Manuel, with who I usually on every other month do this section with, and myself, we record a longer version of this as a podcast. So I suggest you check it out, either in podcast form or as a YouTube, where you get pretty slides. And new episodes for that are coming out. Earlier this week, we put one up that was slightly delayed from about 2 months ago, but I'm catching up on the editing, so more will come soon. And
worth the wait.
Yeah. And with that, I'll hand it back to Rob.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you very much, Guy. All right, you're about to see a little bit more of Guy, though. His presentation is our next one up. So while he shares his screen, let me tell you a little bit more about him if you haven't met Guy before. Guy's been building things on the internet for more than 2 decades now, and is still learning how to do things better. He's currently working for Versant in Melbourne as a principal consultant in the cloud adoption space, and it looks like he's good to go. So over to you, Guy. I'll switch over now.
Thanks, Rob. And hi everyone, again. So this is a little talk about a project I recently did, building pipelines for cross-account deployments using CDK. So I just thought I'd share the love. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go quickly through some of the how it's put together, and then I'm going to try and do a little demo at the end, hopefully, all things being good. So essentially the design goal here is that you have a shared services account. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this idea, a shared services account, and then you have your production, your dev accounts all separated. But all your tooling for deploying into those accounts is done out of a DevOps account, which is what we see here. Here. I don't know if you can see my mouse when I do that, but anyway. So first of all, oh great. So first of all, we need a repo that's going to be deployed from. So in here, I've just drawn a code commit instance, but you can also use GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket, although I haven't actually written support for Bitbucket into it just yet. The project, I'll show a QR code shortly that has the code, and if you want to quickly snap that when I get to that, you can follow along at home when we do the code walkthrough. So essentially, you know, a key element of this is having KMS involved in a CMK. So we're going to encrypt all the build artifacts that we generate in the DevOps account, and then we need to be able to allow the other accounts to share the key. So it's a key piece of information that you need. Sorry about the pun. Then we're going to have some roles created, and they're going to be created in the relevant target accounts. And those, depending on what kind of deployment we're doing, there's either 1 or 2 roles involved. If it's an S3 deploy, we only need this cross-account role. If we're doing a CloudFormation deploy, we also need this CloudFormation deployment role. Once we've got those things in place, we're going to build the pipeline itself. So you can see here there's a source stage, there's a build stage, and then there's a deployment stage, which is going to happen through CloudFormation in the target account. The artifact bucket that you can see here, the artifacts are going to be encrypted with the key that's also going to be shared with the target account. And the nice thing about this, and the reason why it's kind of neat and pleases me, is because I'm a sort of a product guy, right? So I like making products rather than one-off things. So the nice thing about this is that you can rinse and repeat. So once you've done one set of pipelines, it's very, very easy using this project to just keep churning out lots of matching pipelines to do the same thing. So that's essentially what we'll end up with, is what's in that diagram right now. It does make some assumptions, as everything does, because this is not a one-size-fits-all problem that we're trying to solve here. This is just something that's handy for solving the particular problems that I needed to solve. But the assumptions are there. So one pipeline per repo plus branch. So repo plus branch has a pipeline. That's an assumption that's built in. We're triggering on commits to that repo and branch. We did need to support a manual approval stage, so that's covered here too. And we're just using code build, so there's not. If your project can't be built using code build, then this won't help you, at least out of the box. So we'll just do a bit of a code walkthrough here. So I'm going to try and do this reasonably quickly, and then we can just try a quick run through of the pipelines and change some stuff just for fun. So here's that QR code. So if you wanted to, I'll leave it there for a count of 10, let's say, if anyone wants to quickly pull it up and follow along at home. But you can just look at it later as well. It's on GitHub, the project. So this was originally written in CDK 1, so 1.102 or whatever the version was at the time. And I did actually take the opportunity to upgrade this to CDK version 2. So CDK version 2 came out, I think, last month. And you can see I've upgraded here to 2.0.0 RC1. I think there's a much later release candidate now. So that gives you an indication of how quickly I gave it a go. So converting the project to a CDK2 project wasn't that complicated. One of the things you'll see here, if you look, is obviously previously all the individual components, like it was all broken down into individual components as opposed to just bundled into one big library. So that's actually a really nice feature, I think. It makes it a lot easier. You don't get out of whack with different versions of different components now, which is good. So that was one thing. Another thing is it now has this different way of importing it. So and there's additional sort of components that has been broken down into. So it's now there's the AWS CDK itself, there's the constructs library, and there's aspects. Three separate things that you'll need to work with in CDK2 as compared to CDK1. Not a lot of like, it really probably took me about half an hour to convert this thing to CDK2. It really wasn't a big job at all, but you'll see how that's used a little bit differently to if you're familiar with CDK1 projects. Yep. So aspects, anyway, what aspects are is they're a way to apply an operation to all the constructs in a given scope. So that's what they're for, and you'll see how that's used in a sec. I'm using context variables to basically configure this project at runtime to configure it for different repos, different branches, different GitHub repos, different accounts, etc., etc. So you can see all that config there. There's quite a lot of defaults that are set up. So I should have probably prefaced this with this is in the app pie. So this is the sort of wrapper around all your stacks. So we've got a lot of default sort of stuff set up here so that it's just to make life easier. So the default region, you can override the region if you want to, but you don't have to. If you don't override it, you'll get whatever default region is, which is just, making it work as easily as it can out of the box. You don't have to configure everything. There's a demo stack, which I've also included here, which basically just gives you a S3 bucket, a CloudFront distribution set up so that you can use these pipelines without having to set that other stuff up manually. So I guess if you're looking for a basic solution for hosting a single page app or a PWA in S3 with CloudFront, that's not a bad little project to get you started as well. But I've included it here so that you can essentially run through and demo these things yourselves if you want to. The other thing to call out here is I'm using the input from the context variables to build the stack. To build the stack identifier. So that's how we can kind of create as many different ones as we want to using that method. And then here down here you can see where we're using aspects. So we're using aspects to basically tag everything that's in the app with whatever tags I want, basically. So you can just add them in here, and every resource you create will get tagged with those things, which is just a nice time saver. Just having it all in one place, and you know that everything's going to get tagged. So I'll just walk through now individually. So let's have a quick look at the repo stack. So the repo stack is essentially a optional thing. If you've got if you've got an existing repo, then you don't need to create it. You can just skip this stage. There was quite a comprehensive README at the start of this project as well, which obviously I haven't shown you, but if you go to GitHub, you'll see that it's quite a comprehensive README file at the front of this. So this is sort of the problem I was solving here too was we had a customer who was using GitLab, and they kind of we wanted them to be able to deploy using AWS native tools. And obviously, if you're aware of the code tools in AWS, the one integration they don't have from source is GitLab. So this is partly a solution for that. So this will create a repo, a code commit repo, and all it needs is the repo name. And what it will then do is it'll give you it'll create a minimal user that you can use with GitLab to basically mirror a GitLab repo into code commit. So it'll mirror in all of the branches that you want to mirror, basically, and from there on, it's all pure AWS tooling. So that's the repo. So now we'll build the pipeline key stack. This is a pretty simple one. So it's really just the KMS key that we're building here. And you can see we've created an alias for it as well, because if you don't create a key alias, then it's really hard to know what's going on. And we've identified it with the repo name and branch and the target account ID, so that you can, if you're looking at the key, you can actually see what it's there for. And in addition, we're granting decrypt for the target account. So the target account's the one we're going to be deploying into, and the DevOps account. So this is being created in the DevOps account, and the key has to be able to be used by the target account. So that's what that's doing. So it's setting it up. We're also outputting the pipeline key ARN, and we're going to import that later on into another stack. The cross-account role stack's probably the most complicated one. What we're doing here is we're passing in the DevOps account ID. So remember, these are being now created in the target account. So we need to pass in the DevOps account ID that's going to be assuming these roles. We want the pipeline key RN, because again, we need that account to be able to use that key. And also we can pass in the target bucket. So if we pass in the target bucket, we would do that if we're doing an S3 deploy. So it needs to know what the S3 bucket is in its own account, so that it can make some policies around that, essentially. So there's a couple of things here. So we've sort of got a circular dependency here around the artifact bucket. So the artifact buckets are things that's going to be written into by the pipeline. The pipeline hasn't been built yet, but we kind of need to, we want to create in the roles, we need to create the ability to read that artifact bucket. So it's sort of a circular dependency, and I got around that by just saying, and if anyone's got a better idea, please let me know. And that enables you to create the cross-account role using just a wildcard S3 resource here. And you can then go back, once you've created the artifact bucket in the next stack, you can take that artifact bucket and rerun this stack with the artifact bucket context variable, and it will then update the policy to only be that to that bucket instead. So that's an option you can do. So we create that. Then we create 2 empty policy statements here. So one for the one's going to be used for just the cross account role, and one that's going to be used for the CloudFormation deployment role if we need it. We then basically are appending to those policy statements the ability to use the key and to access the artifact bucket to get, put, and list bucket on that. So that's on the artifact bucket. We also just put a role in here or a policy in here to allow access to parameter store. For when we're doing builds, this role will be able to access parameter store. You can like, this was what I needed. It might not be exactly what you need, but you know, the joy of a shared code is you can take this and hack it and do whatever you like with it. So if it doesn't do exactly what you want, just change it. So if I've been given a target bucket, that means I'm doing an S3 deploy. So the target bucket means there's a bucket in the deploy account that I'm going to put something into. So if I pass a target bucket into this stack, it will only generate the policy for working with that bucket, basically, because we don't need the CloudFormation deployment role and all the policies associated with it. So that's what this is doing. It's just setting it up to give it access to the deployment bucket. So you can see it gets delete object, put object, and abort, which are the needed permissions in that scenario to do an S3 deploy using the S3 deploy action. So if we're doing if we're building in addition a CloudFormation deployment role, then we need to add in all this stuff. So it needs to be able to do a lot of actions on CloudFormation. It needs to be able to do access the serverless transform, so that if you give it a SAM template, it's going to know what to do. In addition, if it's a SAM project, which is, again, my use case was it was going to be a SAM project or a simple CDK project, you're going to need to also access a whole bunch of actions related to Lambda. So imagine you're deploying a SAM project. Often people just use administrator access. If you want to make your life hard like I did, you can try and use least permissions instead, which is what this is doing. Again, there's some stuff in the README about how to go about creating or identifying the least permissions you might need. It actually uses one of Ian Mackay's projects to do that. So have a look at the README for that. So now that we've created those policies, we're going to create the roles and give those roles those policies as inline policies. So that's both of them there. So you can see there's a cross-account role and a deployment role, the deployment role being where the service principal is CloudFormation. So CloudFormation is going to assume that role and use it when it's doing a SAM deploy. And this one's just being used by the pipeline. So the account principal there is the DevOps account ID. If it's an S3 deploy, what are we doing here? Yeah. So if there isn't a target bucket here, so it's a CloudFormation, we need to build that. So basically what we're doing is here, we're taking the base policy statements object and we're extending it with a deployment policy statement. So we're giving it everything that's in the cross account role we created, but adding in also all the special stuff that we needed for CloudFormation, which was perhaps a little imperfect, but anyway, it is what it is. And you can see here, that's the, I think there's a duplicate a little bit of this previous slide, but anyway, you can see it's assumed by CloudFormation. Finally, we're on to the actually building the pipeline stack itself. So we've got our repo, we've got our key, we've got our cross-account roles. Now all we need to do is actually put together the pipeline that brings it all together. So you can see there's quite a few arguments passed into this one because it has a lot of configuration items that can be pulled in. So each of these stacks outputs something that feeds into the next stack. So you can see we've got cross-account roles and deployment role ARNs, and in the previous stack you would have seen a key ARN, I think, for the cross-account roles. So we're doing that way in part, which might seem a little clunky, copy and paste and such, but because you can't export CloudFormation exports between accounts. I know there's other ways you can potentially do it, but they're too hard for me. So the easiest way was to export, like to output the information and feed it into the next stage. So that's what's happening here, essentially. And so this is an example. Actually, this is an example where we can actually import it. So we are actually doing a CloudFormation import value here, pulling in the pipeline key. Because we're back in the DevOps account building the pipeline, we can access the exported value, the CloudFormation exported value here. So that's what we're doing for the pipeline key ARN, rather than having to actually provide it on the command line. We are creating the artifacts bucket. So this is the bucket that's going to be used by code build to write the artifacts from the build process into. Then we've got our cross-account roles. We're creating role objects for CDK role objects, so that we can do magical things with them when we pass them to code pipeline, so that it gets what it's expecting. So we're just doing that by converting the role ARN, using that to create the role object here. What else is here? Artifacts bucket to resource policy. Yeah, so we're adding the resource policy here to allow the deployment role principal to access all the objects in the bucket here. So all the objects in the artifacts bucket, which it needs to be able to do. The deployment role needs to be able to read that bucket, basically. Now we've created the code pipeline, so this is the actual pipeline. We finally got to it. So that creates the pipeline. You can see we're passing the artifacts bucket to it. That's about it. That's really super interesting there. Restart execution update means that if you update the pipeline, does it restart the execution? I've set that to true. Your mileage may vary. We've created a source output, a code pipeline artifact. So that's the output from the source stage will be written to there. Here's our source stage. So this is for the GitHub source action. We're passing the secret ARN. So it assumes that you've got a GitHub token, OAuth token, and you've written it into Secrets Manager, because of course that's how you do that sort of thing. And if you want to use code commit, then this is the source stage for that. And as I said, I haven't done a source stage for Bitbucket. You could do that pretty easily, because Bitbucket is a first-class citizen in code pipeline. This is the config for the build project. So you can see we're using a build spec.yaml, which is expecting to find it in the code repository, at the root of the code repository. You can see we've added some logging here to CloudWatch for code build as it's working. It'll output some logs to that. I don't think they're super useful, to be honest, but anyway. You set up some environment things like what build image we want to use, etc. And that it has to be privileged because for SAM it uses containers inside that. So if you don't privilege set privilege to true, it can't run the container operations or something like that. And here's our build stage. So the that takes that build project and defines it as a code build action. Then we're down into the actually configuring the CloudFormation deploy action. So we can override the default stack name. So by default, the stack name is going to be this. Remember, this is the stack name that's going to be built in the target account. So by default, it's going to be the stack name is going to be built out of repo name, repo branch, and stack. But if you override it by providing your own stack name, you can. And then we get into the actual CloudFormation actions, code pipeline actions, which have the longest names. CloudFormation create, replace, change set action. So that's what we do first. So that creates the change set. You can see it's using the cross-account role and the deployment role down here. And then we've got a manual approval stage, which is only ticked off or is only created if you pass an approvers, pass approvers in the command line when you create this pipeline. So if you don't pass that, you don't get a manual approval stage, which is handy. But if all you've got to do is pass approvers equals and a list of email addresses, and it'll set all that stuff up magically for you, which is good. And finally, we've got the deploy change set action. How am I going for time there, Rob? Okay. All right, cool. Oh, that's perfect, actually. So I just wanted to do a little, because life is too boring if you don't try and do a demo and ruin everything. So I just thought I'd do a little demo. So essentially, this is the sort of model you'd have. You've got a SAM project, which is providing you an API of some sort, and then you've got a single page app. Single page app is going to be built using npm build or something along those lines. Your SAM project is going to be built using SAM deploy or SAM package, and deployed via CloudFormation. So you've got these two quite different beasts, and this project supports building a pipeline for each of those. And so that's what I've done. So I'm not going to build the pipelines now, but what I will do is I will stop sharing here, if I can figure out how to do that. I'm going to stop sharing this screen. Can move Skype over there. I'm going to close that one. I'm going to pull this one up. How can it have gone to sleep already? Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm just going to start sharing my other screen. Hopefully that's going to come up. Can you see? Yeah, awesome. Okay, just while we're here, this is the step functions workflow, which I was just having a quick look at before. So let me just go back here. So this is the CloudFormation, the last CloudFormation run for the API. And here are our pipelines, which I'll have to reload, so just bear with. Yeah. So you can see this is our simple deployment pipeline for the SPA. It's just a source stage, a build stage, and a deploy stage, and it's using S3 deploy. This one is the API one, so this is the CloudFormation pipeline, and it's going to deploy the SAM project, and it has some extra stages. So you've got source, build again, code build, create change set, approve change set, and deploy change set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly try and what I'll do first is I'll just show you. So this is the API. It just says goodbye white square at the moment, and then there's an app with the same thing. So this is the SPA, and all it's doing is calling the API to get this message. So it's a pretty dicky example, but it will do. So what I'll do here is I'll just change the message to hello, and I will save that. So this is my SAM project here. So this is just the app.py. This is just the Lambda, simple out of the box Lambda. All I've done is I've added the cause headers to it. This is my view app. I'm not going to change that at all. So all I'm going to do now is commit that change and do a git push. Then I'm going to switch back to here, and you can see it's already started the source stage. It's already been triggered. So this is in GitHub, but as I said, you can also use GitLab, and you can use mirroring to push the data from your GitLab repo into code commit, and everything actually works really nicely. You still get all your commit messages showing up throughout your pipeline, which is a nice thing. What else? And yeah, so this is based on Git. This repo is in GitHub. I'll just quickly maybe try and pull that up while we're doing nothing here. I should already be signed in, but I'm not. What an annoyance. And of course, I'm using two-factor authentication because I'm a good boy, and everyone should. And what seems to have gone wrong here? There we go. Yep. Oh, Chris Coombs just started following me. Wow. Thanks, Chris. I feel popular all of a sudden. So this is the project here. As you can see, it's pretty well documented, but if you find anything that doesn't make sense, please feel free to let me know. Over here you can see I've got my it's now stuck on the approve change set because it's waiting for approval, so I will just go ahead and approve that. Now it'll be deploying the change set. Let me just go back here. For some reason it seems, I think it happens so quickly that it doesn't generally, there you go, update in progress. So you can see the update in progress is just kicked in. So this is, on the left is my DevOps account, and on the right is my production account. And there we go, update complete, all done. So that took, what, how many minutes? About 2 minutes to do the whole thing. we should have now hello white square, which we do, which you probably can't see on the video, but if we open up here and go refresh, hello white square, there you go. So that's it. Let me know if that's useful to you, or if you've got any questions or whatever. I'm very interested in, I guess, understanding what is useful. So, and for some reason I can't seem to bring Skype up. Okay. Oh, what am I doing?
Cool. Thank you very much, Guy. That was excellent. Very in detailed, which is always good. And I love looking at other people's code. It's always nice to see how people do things. So if you are watching out there, I can see we've got one question come through already. If you do have any questions of Guy, please feel free to post them now so we can we'll ask them on your behalf. While we wait for them to do that, Guy, I have a question for you myself.
Oh, yep.
Despite Chris's taunting in the YouTube chat, which I'm sure you'll see at the end of this,
Right.
that looked a whole lot better than trying to do anything in CloudFormation. How do you actually go about testing your changes and stuff like that? Is it you have to wait for the whole deployment and then run everything, or is there an easier way?
So you're talking about testing your CloudFormation, or you're talking about testing as in your CI/CD pipeline running tests?
Both. So you're using the CDK to design and build those things. How do you actually test changes to the code that you've written?
Okay. So, I mean, essentially the CDK is just generating CloudFormation. So you can run your CloudFormation through any of the standard processes you would use to check the quality of your CloudFormation. So that's that one. And in terms of obviously, the build process for the projects themselves, you have full control over that. So the buildspec.yaml file is in the root of your application repos. So whatever your test process is, or whatever your build process, like if you've got a complicated build process you want to run to check, all the ins and outs of your applications, they would live there as they would today in any sort of normal CI/CD pipeline.
So you basically test it with real load, more or less. So you don't have, say, a dev version of your DevOps account.
I mean, you could, but I guess the purpose here is you're building the pipeline factory so that you can deploy to all those other, dev, test, whatever. You can deploy the same code base out to all of those different accounts and do all your volume testing there, or your load testing there. Yeah, that would be the general.
You could put your pipeline factory inside a pipeline.
You could.
Then of how you create the pipeline factory.
Yeah.
Right. Let's move on to the actual questions from people.
Okay. And then you start talking about inception pipelines, and then my brain explodes. Yeah.
My brain already exploded just trying to follow along with all of that. So, question.
Yeah.
Question from VJ. He's curious to know how you would have handled it if it's a on-premises Git server, like say Bitbucket Enterprise.
So I guess the model that could potentially work there is to mirror it out to code commit. You've got a relatively sort of secure path, I guess, out to doing that. But I guess it's. And I mean, really, essentially, that's why we ended up with going to code commit for this customer who had everything in GitLab, was because we couldn't work with it directly. We could have used GitLab's own tooling, but the security guy on the gig basically said, well, if you're using GitLab's own tooling, you're putting access credentials into GitLab and trusting them not to balls it up. So.
I think in most cases it would be easier to extend or mirror your code into AWS than it is to extend your security model from AWS to another tool.
Yeah, that was That was the feeling we had.
Yeah. So essentially, as long as you can mirror it into code commit, it could be anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. I think that's all of the questions that we had. Thank
All
you
of the
very much,
questions.
Guy. That was awesome.
Yeah.
We posted the
Okay.
URL in the chat as well, and if we can post it on Slack, anybody can go and check it out if they want to go and check it out.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you very
Sounds
much,
good.
Guy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so on to our second presentation of the evening. Prerna, if you could share your screen now when you're ready. While she does that, tell you a little bit about Prerna. He is a platform engineer at Belong, whose current role involves a lot of designing and building cloud infrastructure, so it never really gets monotonous there. Some of Prerna's recent projects have been great learning experiences, and she's realized now it's time she would like to start sharing what she has learned. She's also a new mum, and she's a new mum too, and is currently learning to juggle between career and mum life, and mostly tries to just go with the flow instead of trying to balance them at the same time. Prerna, you have shared your screen, but it looks like that's the presenter notes instead of the actual presentation. We're able to swap to the other one, where we can see PowerPoint. It's still the presenter notes. That's it. We can see that. All right, we'll just switch over to Prerna now.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Prerna Priyadarshini, and today I'm going to talk about how did I go about connecting a macOS EC2 instance as a Jenkins agent to build the iOS and build and test the iOS apps. But before I do that, since I'm a new speaker here, a quick introduction. I work as a platform engineer with Belong. Belong is a Telstra's company that sell better valued plans. And my current role, I do, as I was introduced as, do a lot of AWS infrastructure build, design, architect, doing a bit of logging framework and security tooling aspects at the moment as well. And on the personal front, new mom, striking the balance, trying to, I must say, strike the balance. And that's how you can picture me working from home, aka working from the nursery. So yeah. Before we get into things, wanted to give you a little background of why I ended up doing this project. So at the beginning of this financial year, one of the mission statements that Belong had was to really improve the speed to market for the mobile apps that included both iOS and Android apps. And in order to do that, we wanted to automate the build deployment processes, the testing, etc. For these apps. Now, Android looked straightforward, a lot of out-of-the-box solutions available, but from iOS being iOS, we had to do a little bit of research on what is the best way, or what is the best way forward for us. So we looked at the macOS EC2 instance. It is a very newly launched instance. I think November 2020 was when it was launched. And we did a few POCs, and we realized that there are certain limitations that we have to work with. Now, with these limitations, let me walk you through the limitations first. First one is the availability. So it's currently available in the 5 regions only: Northern Virginia, Ohio, Oregon, Ireland, and Singapore. Now, our infrastructure is mostly in Sydney region, so we have to get around the connectivity bit. The second one is running on dedicated host. Now, the Mac instance runs on dedicated host, which meant that starting and stopping of the instance would take longer. It's not as seamless and as quick as it would be for other operating systems. The third one was around billing. Now, because of the Apple license agreement, we have to upfront pay for the first 24 hours. That means that even if you bring up the instance, do your build, test, etc., and you finished in the first, say, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or whatever workload you have, 1 hour, you still pay for the full 24-hour mark, and then it switches to the usual per second method. So these limitations were what we had to keep in mind, but we also had to make sure that we wanted to use the existing Jenkins setup that we have. We wanted to utilize it as much as possible. So keeping these two factors in mind, this is the sort of action plan we settle on. So use the existing Jenkins in the Sydney region, set up the macOS instance in the Northern Virginia region. And the reason we chose Northern Virginia is because it's one of the regions whitelisted in our SCP. Now, then connect these two using cross-region VPC pairing. I'll come to why we chose the VPC pairing. And then have the instance as the permanent Jenkins agent attached to the Jenkins, and our Jenkins run on the EKS cluster. So this would be one of the permanent Jenkins agent attached. Otherwise, we do not have any other permanent Jenkins at the moment. And then use this agent to run only the macOS build. So we labeled it, and only the jobs that has this label will use this in the image, the instance. Moving on to the architecture. So as I said, we have the Jenkins EKS cluster here in the Sydney region. Created a simple VPC, have the instance here, and then the cross-region VPC pairing to connect the instance. Now, for the Sydney region, we have, for all the services that we have in the Sydney region, we have Transit Gateway. But this is a temporary setup for us, because once the instance is available in the Sydney region, we would like to move it within the same VPC here. And this, we wanted to keep it temporary and cheap, so we chose to use the cross-region VPC pairing for this one. And to implement these are the 4 high-level steps that we had. So create the VPC first, launch the dedicated host, and then the instance on it. And once it is ready, connect to the instance, prepare the instance to install whatever binaries we wanted to install, to be able to run the build and test, and then hook it to our Jenkins master to run the builds. I'll get into these steps one after the other. So the first one, as I said, the VPC setup, kept it very, very simple. I have just one availability zone here, and the reason for that is I wanted to attach a private static IP address to it. And the reason for that is I do not want to, in cases where I have to terminate the instance or it gets terminated, I do not want to go back to Jenkins, change the configuration in the Jenkins master, change the IP address and stuff like that. So that's the reason kept it to one AZ. And also, I didn't really need it to be highly available, to be honest, because it's just used to run the macOS builds, which form a very small part of our the whole build ecosystem. So yeah, kept one availability zone. The instance, for security reasons, was kept in the private subnet. For everything it needs to download from the internet or have its internet access, it has the NAT gateway in the public subnet, and then the cross-region VPC pairing here. From the network side of things, closed everything, just whitelisted the port 22 for git commands to run, and then port 443 and 80, of course, to install whatever packages we needed to install here. So this was a simple step here. The next step of launching the instance. Now we have it in the CloudFormation. We do most of the things. I would say most of the things is infra as code. So have CloudFormation template over here, but we can very well do this through CLI or console. So few things that I wanted to highlight. One is this. In the user data, you would notice that I've installed Java. This is for me to connect this instance to Jenkins, and then I have Java 8 here because that's the same version of Java I have on the master. And in a bit, I'll come to the reason of why these two needs to be the same. Volume size, kept it as 100. I think initially it was 60 that we've had, and then we ran into the space issues when trying to install Xcode. So yeah, to make sure that we have good enough volume size. Then we have the instance ENI for the static IP address, and then of course the dedicated host here. Now, what didn't work well for me for this step? As I said initially, I had the intention to automate the process of start and stop of the instance at the beginning of the job. So the job will kick off the instance, and then it will run the build and then stop the instance, and then another instance of job will be another instance of job will start it. But I noticed that the instance takes somewhere between 15 minutes to on the worst days, 3 hours to stop. And that's as per the AWS documentation. There's a scrubbing workflow in the underlying dedicated host that runs, which causes this. So this absolutely meant that if I have to click off another build, I have to wait for this time for the instance to stop and the dedicated host to be free, etc. So we decided to drop the idea of automating this step. Moving on to the next step, connect and prepare. So using the old method of SSH connection, but we also had the VNC installed. So established an SSH tunnel and then had VNC, and it will just open a remote desktop for you to connect to and play around. So did that once everything was set up, we passed on the credentials of the instance to the devs, and they went ahead and installed Xcode Yarn, the devs, the Apple certificate, etc., and whatever else they needed to install. But also note that this AMI comes pre-baked with some of the binaries, like I think it's Xcode CLI, it's Homebrew. So whatever else they needed to install, and then ran a test build on the instance to see if it's ready. And then once that was done, we baked a golden AMI out of the image and then wanted to use it for. So basically the golden AMI was built to later automate the process of start and stop. But yeah, I didn't go around that. Now this is how the VNC desktop looks. So on the client, once your SSH tunnel is established, it'll ask you to connect to localhost, and then it'll open up your remote desktop for you. Moving on to what didn't work well. This is something which you still haven't figured out. We're still trying to. In fact, just before this meeting, I had a chat with one of the dev leads, and he mentioned that you still haven't figured out this one. So when we try to sign the code using the Apple Developer Certificate, when we log in via the VNC and do it via the Xcode UI, we're able to. But when we try to do it through the SSH command line or Jenkins, somehow just doesn't work. We tried various things. We thought the ID through which it is associated isn't set up well because it's a service account, stuff like that. But yeah, still haven't got around this one. And hopefully we find a solution to this one soon. Moving on to the last step. Now this one basically, if you're setting up your Jenkins from scratch, you will not have to do this manually. So what I did was just went to manage node and cloud within my Jenkins master and clicked on a new node and just I added these configuration. But in case you're setting up your Jenkins from scratch, you can very well have this in your manifest file, like add what plugins. For example, I use the SSH build plugin, so add the plugin, add your credentials, and all the parameters that you want to set can be done through it. So the step can be automated as well. Few things that I wanted to call out was this basically the remote root directory should be user/ec2 user because it's Mac OS. I organically did home/ec2 user and then I had issues there. So thought I'll remind you of this. And then in terms of credentials, because I have an EKS set up, I'm using the Kubernetes plugin to reach out to the secret on my namespace, and then just populated it through as this Kubernetes credential here on Jenkins. Few of these settings over here just to keep it consistent with our other nodes for Jenkins, and that's it. Once this is done, you hit on save, and you go to the system logs. You'll be able to see the screen where you can see the node is successfully connected and online. And that's it. Happy days. Thought we'll be able to run the build. But when we tried our first build, what actually happened is it was able to establish the connectivity. It picked up the node that we wanted it to pick up through the label the workspace directory was created on the instance, but it will drop the connection in just a few seconds. And the reason for that was I had installed the latest version of Java, I think Java 16, on the agent, and it was Java 8 on my Jenkins master. And I did not anticipate it to be this issue, so I kept digging and then found out it's a Java version mismatch that has caused the problem. So quintessential point to note, please make sure the Java version is same on both the instance and master. And that's about it. That's all I had. In terms of next step, as I said, we want to have the instance as soon as it is available in the Sydney region. I'll have it in the same VPC I have my Jenkins running. And as a matter of fact, if you have your instance in the same region you have your Jenkins or whatever build server that you're using, you might not have to go around all the 4 steps. Maybe avoid first step 1, depending on your architecture. And then we also want to dig in and see how we go with Xcode Cloud. This is also very, very recently launched. In fact, we had a discussion as well with the development team and realized that, and this is what we had the last discussion about. And they said that they're using manual signatures, manual sign of the code, and Xcode Cloud requires automated signing. So that's where we are at. That's about it. Happy to answer questions if there are any. If you need to find me, this is where you can find me. I will in.
Excellent. Thank you, Brenna. That was very good. And I'm sure we've learned a lot from it.
Yeah, I did.
So there's a couple questions and possibly ideas about your problems. But the first question we've got here is from Aditya, and it's what Jenkins plugin did you use for this?
Oh, thanks, Aditya. So the plugin that I used was SSH build plugin, SSH build agent plugin for that matter. Yeah, there's few SSH something plugins, but yeah, the SSH build plugin, build agent plugin is the one that we used.
Okay. And this gets a bit, I think, in the attempts to help you solve the problem.
Awesome.
From Dean. Is your code signing certificate in the system keychain or the login keychain? Because he doesn't think that SSH logins count as logins on macOS, so therefore can't access the login keychain.
I think it is in the system keychain, but that's a good point. I'll double check. But from what I remember, yeah, it was in the system keychain. But yeah, thanks for that. I'll double check that.
Cool. In the meantime, if anybody else has questions, please ask them. You've got a couple minutes left, maybe. In the meantime, I can ask you a quick question. So, what you mentioned, you ran into a bunch of issues while you were setting this up. Mm-hmm. What was basically the weirdest thing you ran into that you did not expect?
I would say 2 of them. So the start and stop of the instance was where, like, when you create the instance and you try to play around with it, you try to do a couple of things and you tend to start and stop, and then it will take time. And then I'll see the instance has stopped, but the dedicated host is not still available. So had to figure that bit out, and then did a bit of reading to understand that, okay, it's normal for the instance to take 15 minutes or so, or it took 1 hour for me once when I was changing the memory and then bringing it up again. So that was really annoying. And the second part was the Java version mismatch. That was pretty annoying too. I think I spent a day or so trying to figure what would be the issue.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds annoying and yeah. A lot of wasted time with the startups.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see any other questions, so I assume that everybody now has perfect knowledge of how to set up the macOS instance and using it. So, fair enough.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, everybody.
And I'll hand it back to Rob.
Thank you very much, Prerna. That was awesome. I haven't had a chance to do this yet. We're using GitHub Actions at the moment, so we've faced some of the similar issues, and moving to automated code signing helped out a lot with those sorts of things. But I didn't build that. I just get to use it, which is good. It's great when you're just don't have to be the guy building the pipelines for a change. That's always nice. All right, so let's wrap up. So our next event will be, as always, the last Wednesday of the month. So it's the 28th of July next month. At this stage, we're expecting that we will probably be still in virtual events. If that does change, we will let you know as soon as that changes, but I'm not confident that that'll be the case. Big thank you again to our sponsors, without whom this would not be possible. Enabler, AC3, CMD, and Do It International. And that's it. There will be a after meetup chat social gathering on Zoom. I will post the link to that in Slack in just a moment as soon as we get off this broadcast. If you want to come and ask, speak to anybody, or just hang out, talk AWS, we'll be on there. If not, we'll see you next month. Thanks, everybody.